Hi guys. For Module 3, we only have two ed puzzles and two presentations that we're going to be going over. This presentation is the second one, and it's on ethics and professional judgment. Now, before you look at this presentation, I want to make sure that you have read through Chapter 8 in the O'Brien text and also looked at the AOTA's Code of Ethics. There will be a link to this at the end of this presentation, but there's also a link to this listed on under Module 3. So let's get started. So what is the difference between confidential and anonymous? Now, you might be saying to yourself, duh, Dr. Jordan, I understand what the difference is between confidential and anonymous. But you know what? Over my years of teaching, I've realized that there's kind of a gray line here, and not everybody has a clear understanding of the differences between these two. So I want to take some time to share with you some definitions as well as some examples that hopefully you can use moving forward through your OT curriculum career, or if you're in another major, that you can use this within your major as well. So when we talk about being confidential, as OT practitioners, we're often asking personal information of our clients in order to develop that plan of action. If we're conducting any kind of confidential test or an interview or even a research project, an evaluation or treatment session, that person will need to provide some personal information about him or herself. The person that is collecting this information might include ourselves as a medical personnel, a research team member if we're doing research on a topic or research on something that we're doing with our clients, or that respective organization, such as if you're collecting information about, say, how many people from a certain area are coming to your clinic, that information, you might receive some personal information with that you need to keep confidential. Personal information may include a name, phone number, address, date of birth, social security number, medical diagnosis, medications that the person's on, past medical history, and the list goes on and on and on. This information is not shared with anybody that is not directly related or involved with your client, the clinic, the research team, or the organization that you work with. The next one is anonymous. When we use the term anonymous, this means that no personal information is given about a person or a client. And we shouldn't be asking for specific personal information that might give their identity away. If that person needs to follow up or retrieve information, say medical results, or provide additional information that they need to refer to later, a unique identifier such as a number can be provided. In anonymous cases, the individual's responses and results cannot be linked to his or her identity. I want to use another case example of when being anonymous or using anonymity can be used within the OT curriculum or within OT in itself. If you're working with individuals that have Down syndrome, okay, so say you're working in a Down syndrome clinic and all of your patients have Down syndrome, and you want to share information generally about something that was done in the clinic or in your therapy setting, it could be anonymous to say, you know what? I had this student in there today who made me laugh so hard. He does have Down syndrome, but he has such a great sense of humor. That's anonymous because all of the patients that you work with have Down syndrome. So there's really not any way that you're going to be able to link that person that you're talking about with the person that may not be directly related to that client. Another way that this is used in the OT curriculum here at Keuka College is many of us faculty members work in the clinic still. So we are provided clinic days that we do OT. We act as an OT practitioner, which is fun. Many other colleges don't have the luxury of doing that. If you're a full-time faculty, that is your primary role, and you may not have experience in the clinic. Most of the faculty at Keuka College continue to work as OTs. We are able to then bring stories from the clinic into our classrooms and share that information with you. But what we do is we de-identify the clients that we're talking about. So say I actually work at a developmental evaluation clinic, and we work with individuals. They're all children up to the age of about 8. That's usually our cutoff. Sometimes we get a couple of 9-year-olds, but from birth until 8 years of age. If I was going to say we evaluated somebody at the clinic, and I might come in and say, oh my goodness, I saw this really rare diagnosis that I'd not seen before, and I wanted to share that with the class. If the student that I evaluated was a male, I might de-identify it and say that the person was a female. Or I might de-identify and say that the individual is 6 years of age when in fact they might have been 8. Okay, so I de-identify the information. I might change their name. When I've created case studies for my senior students that I work with, I often use cases that I've actually worked with, but I've de-identified it so much that there is no way that they can relay back to that. I often use Disney names in those cases versus using the individual names. So this is what we're talking about with being anonymous. I have 10 examples here that we're going to go through, and after each one, you're going to identify if you feel this is a confidential example or an anonymous example, and you'll do that right in this presentation. So the first one, if you're leaving an unsigned note to the principal of the school's mailbox about something that was observed happening in a classroom, this would be an example of anonymous or confidential. Just write your answer in this presentation. Meeting with your advisor to share that you have witnessed cheating in a class is an example of anonymous or confidential. You send a text message to the site that you are interested in attending for field period, but you forget to sign or type your name. This is an example of being anonymous or confidential. You are shadowing at your field period site when you want to know more about a 7-year-old boy that you have been working with. You arrange to meet with your supervisor at the end of the day in a private office to discuss him. This is an example of what? Anonymous or confidential. A staff member writes a specific diagnostic test or diagnosis next to a patient's name on a communication board that is visible to visitors on a patient unit. This is anonymous or confidential. Every 6 weeks, the practice holds a vasectomy clinic. Normal Saturday morning surgery continues as usual. Patients for both clinics come along and book in at reception and take a seat in the waiting room all together. No one is aware that there are 2 clinics going on at the same time, and nothing is advertised to say that there is a vasectomy clinic taking place that morning. This is an example of what? Anonymous or confidential. You leave a note on your professor's desk explaining that the work is too hard. You do not leave your name and do not retrieve feedback on your note. This is an example of what? Anonymous or confidential. Derek is an EMT, emergency medical technician. He was on call and identified the patient as his mother's neighbor, Sally. He does not tell Sally that he knows her. This is an example of anonymous or confidential. Derek is an EMT. He was on call and identified the patient as his mother's boss, Tom. He does not tell his mother that he saw Tom. This is an example of what? Anonymous or confidential. It would be best practice to practice blank when talking to your advisor and professor about something sensitive that happened in class. This is anonymous or confidential. That's it for that. Now we're going to talk more about ethics and morality. This is now where we're referring to Chapter 8 as well as the AOTA Code of Ethics. When we talk about ethics, basically this is just a set of moral principles. that are created and guided and utilized by a set of individuals. With AOTA, all OT practitioners that are members of AOTA will follow this set of principles. This is what is set forth as a code of ethics. It's a code for behavior. This is so that individuals know what is expected of them. And there is a set of principles that we have to follow. And therefore, if we don't follow them, then we have to face any kind of, I don't want to say punishment, but the results of the consequences. Sorry, couldn't find the word. The consequences of what happens if we don't follow them. This offers a code of ethics, offers and govern on actions within society. When we talk about morality, this is what is internal to us. These are beliefs that we have about what is right or wrong. Ethics is a critical reflection about morality, but they are two different entities. Just wanted you to be aware of that. When we talk about law, law protects the welfare and safety of society. It resolves conflicts, and it's constantly evolving. You are probably able to think about think about something that has happened in the media where a law has been started because of something that has happened. For an example, in the area that I live in is in Syracuse. There was a law that was set forth. It's called Maddox Law. And Maddox was a little girl that was brutally killed by her father. And you would think that that would be automatically a felony and be treated as such. But what happened is that Maddox was not killed in her home. And so therefore, without the laws that were in place, her father could not be charged at the highest with the highest crime because she was actually killed in another county. Maddox Law was set forth to say that this cannot happen anymore, and that if the individual dies at the hand of her parent, even if it's not in their home, that they could be charged with the highest level of crime. A sad case, but these are why laws come about. They are continually and constantly evolving. Here is a video that we're going to look at. It's not very long, but it's about the great debate between ethics and law. So let's look at it.
Well, good evening. Let's meet the debaters. Debater number 1 comes to us from the land of youth and inexperience. Her opinion is that our moral code should be regulated by law, and of course, that if an action is ethical, it should be legal. And if an action is legal, it should be ethical. Please welcome Tiffany. Debater number 2 comes to us with wisdom and experience, and believes that ethics, by their very nature, are not laws, and sometimes an action can be legal, but not ethical, or ethical, but not legal. Please welcome Dave. Alrighty then. I'll have each of the debaters give an opening statement. Dave, since you come from the land of wisdom and experience, let's begin with you.
Thank you. I think I can express my opinion best with this song. Dim the lights. And bring in old Betsy.
Another big debate about the moral code. Ethics got you in a twist, don't know which way to go. So make the best of this test of wrong and right. It's the big question of law and ethics and their plight. It's something unpredictable. You never know what's right. Ethics are not laws, no, not quite.
Wow, he's really good.
I knew he would be. So take communal sense of how to act in mind. Fiduciary law is the one that binds confidence and trust among businesses' trials, maximizing stock price for shareholder stockpiles. It's something unpredictable. You never know what's right. Ethics are not laws, no, not quite. Sometimes hard to sort it out, not often black or white. Ethics are not laws, no, not quite. Now that this song is done and life goes on, my friend, be sure to keep in mind the lesson in the end. Ethics are not laws, nor are all laws ethical. Act for the right, not just to law's code minimal. Ethics are how you ought to act, not everyone agrees. This lesson, remember for me, please.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit about, just want to make sure that we're still going here. Okay, sorry, just want to make sure we're still on here. Okay, so I just thought that video was so cute, and it makes ethics, which is such a heavy and often daunting task to think about, it just kind of brings it to the surface and kind of makes it fun. So when we talk about ethical problems, there's actually three components to this. There's either ethical distress, ethical dilemma, and locus of authority. These are all listed out in chapter 8, but it's on page 73. So make sure you read through this information, as I'm going to just be highlighting each of these areas. But when we talk about an ethical distress, it's situations that challenge our professional integrity. So these are things that involves feelings that something just isn't right, and it signifies the need to work through an ethical decision-making process, which we're going to talk about in a couple more minutes. But these are things that when something happens and you're thinking of as an OT, and you're like, you know what? Something just doesn't seem right here. What is going on? And then you have to figure out, there's 6 steps to go through the decision-making process to say, is this an ethical issue or ethical problem or not? An ethical dilemma is a situation in which 2 or more ethical principles collide with one another. We're going to talk about ethical principles in a couple of minutes as well. But these are when 2 things are colliding with one another and you're trying to figure out what is the best action to take. The last one is a locus of authority. This requires decision about who should be that primary decision maker. When you're working as an OT and you're working with an individual, my area of expertise is kids and pediatrics, so I'm going to use this example. If you're working with a 5-year-old and you're working in their home with the child, and the child says that they want something, say they want a snack, okay? We can't just, the child wants ice cream, we'll say, and we know that the child is lactose intolerant. So we have a problem here. The child is wanting ice cream. They're not going to do anything unless they get ice cream. And we have to say, but the individual is lactose intolerant. We have to then figure out who has the right to say that the child can, in fact, have ice cream, okay? That locus of authority would be their parent or their guardian. Again, this is a lighthearted conversation in terms of ethics, but I just want to give you an idea that that locus of authority, in fact, for that child is that parent. That parent ultimately has that primary decision-making ability. So the 6 steps that are involved when solving an ethical problem are we have to gather all the facts. We have to look and see what is going on, make sure that we have all bases covered. We have to identify what is the ethical problem. Is it an ethical distress, dilemma, or locus of authority? Then we have to identify the ethical principle. We're going to talk about those as soon as this slide is over with. We then have to clarify the professional duties that are outlined in the Code of Ethics and what is the conduct that is required of everybody involved. Everybody has a certain set of roles and responsibility, and we want to make sure that they're following within their scope of practice. Then we're going to explore all the alternatives, what are the desired outcomes, and what are those consequences that might take place. When we're thinking about that, we're looking at who else is involved and what are the consequences for all of those individuals that are involved. We're going to complete the action, and then we're going to evaluate that process and the outcomes. Kind of a sense of reflecting. We want to make sure, in fact, that what is happening is what we're hoping and deeming to be appropriate for for what our outcome is going to be. So let's talk about ethical principles. The first one is autonomy and confidentiality. We talked a lot about being anonymous and also the term confidentiality. But when we talk about this is really that right to participate in and decide on a course of action without undue influences. This allows clients to have the freedom to decide and act on what they want to do. They have the right to refuse therapy services. They have the right to be well informed of what your qualifications are. Okay? This information, and also know that all information that is shared with the OT is going to be kept confidential. So from the OT's point of view, we want to include the client in the goal-making process. We want to educate the individual regarding what services are available, what interventions we're recommending, what are the risks, and what are the outcomes that are expected from these services. We're going to receive informed consent for services, meaning that the individual is going to sign or state that they want to engage in the intervention or plan that you've set forth. We're respecting refusal for OT services. I'm going to come back to that in a minute, and we're maintaining confidentiality. Now, individuals do have the right to refuse treatment, okay? If you, say you sprain your ankle, okay? You have the right to use ice or to use heat on your ankle. That is something that you have. The doctor can make the recommendations. Maybe they're recommending a splint. It's up to you to determine if you want to wear that splint. That's what we're talking about here. The clients have the right to do what they want, to participate to the level that they desire. However, there becomes an ethical principle, or an ethical problem, I should say, if, say, you're working with a client in a nursing home and the insurance company is paying for them to receive therapy services at the nursing home. If they refuse therapy, the insurance company, that consequence, might not pay for their stay. They have to be well informed. They have to understand that this is a possibility. If they don't participate in therapy, their stay may not be covered, and then it's ultimately up to them to make those payments. They usually decide to participate in therapy. But this is what we're talking about, that there's consequences that are in play. Veracity. This is the duty to tell the truth. We have to be honest with our clients. We have to let them know upfront what to expect and what to expect from us. Okay, so we have to be honest. We can't mislead our clients or manipulate a situation so that they don't feel comfortable. Here's an example. When working in a private practice, you review a marketing ad for your facility. Sorry for the typo. It should just say ad as an advertisement. It says, with our occupational therapy services, you will be back to yourself within 4 weeks guaranteed. Can we say this? Can we be honest that they're going to be back to themselves if they participate in our therapy sessions? Not really. That's misleading. That's going against veracity. We cannot say that. We can say that that you're going to improve, but we certainly cannot give an end goal of they're going to be back to themselves. When we talk about beneficence, this is contributing to the good health and welfare of clients. We treat each client equitably, meaning that it doesn't matter how they're paying for their services or what they're going to get out of their services. We're treating everybody equally. I work with pediatrics, as I mentioned before. I've done early intervention for many, many years, meaning that I go into individuals' homes to provide therapy. Some of the homes I go into are less than desirable or less than pleasurable to be in. I've worked in homes that there's been dirt floors. I've worked in homes where there's been bugs crawling around. But I can't not treat that individual just because of that. Okay. I've worked in homes where the house has been almost a mansion. Of course, I would prefer to work there, but I can't treat people differently by what they have. This is that, using the code of ethics of beneficence. We also advocate for our clients, meaning that we're going to provide them with all of the educational opportunities that they need in order to better themselves. Maybe this is giving them information about an intervention or a test that we're using. Maybe it's giving them information about a support group that is available to them. Maybe it's giving them information on how to find funding sources to buy durable medical equipment when their insurance won't cover it. That's what we're talking about when we mention about advocating for our clients. We promote public health, safety, and well-being. Ultimately, we want everybody to be safe. We want everybody to have a good quality of life. We charge fees that are reasonable and to the services that are provided. Meaning that if you work in a rural area and you're the only OT around, you're not going to charge twice as much as what a competitor in another area where other OTs are available to clients. Okay, so you want to make sure that you're not price gouging, essentially, and that we're being conscientious to our clients. When we talk about non-maleficence, this is doing no harm, meaning that we're identifying any concerns regarding professional skills of our colleagues to appropriate authorities, and we're avoiding relationships or activities that influence or interfere with our services. Case of a couple of examples. The second one, we're not going to date our clients. We're not going to date our clients' family members. Okay? That's not right. Okay? That can cause harm to the individual, to yourself, to your license. It's not ethically a good thing to do. If you are noticing that maybe one of the professionals you're working with, another OT, a PT, a speech pathologist, is doing something that is out of their scope of practice or maybe may hinder the progress that you're working with a client on, you need to report that. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. That's non-maleficence. Okay, advocacy. I want to take a couple more minutes to talk about this. It's not in the chapter, but it is part of beneficence, and it is really important to our profession. So we're going to offer public support or recommendations for a particular cause or policy. You're going to, it's the act of pleading for, supporting, or recommending. This could be services, it could be equipment, it could be for funding sources. There's a variety of things that you're going to look at here. It's also the act of speaking on behalf of or in support of a person, place, or thing. If you're advocating for your client, you're offering them the best possible treatment, education, support that you can offer them. When we talk about fidelity, hopefully what happens is the term faithfulness comes to you. This is a strict observance of promises and duties. We are faithful to one another, our professional relationships. We're maintaining confidentiality of our clients. We're accurately representing our qualifications, meaning I am an occupational therapist. I'm not an occupational therapy assistant. We're definitely reporting when misconduct occurs. This is our ethical responsibility. And it also prevents any breaches of the code of ethics. When we fall under this category, we are considered mandated reporters. Okay, some people might want to call them whistleblowers. That's another term that isn't as seen in the professional realm, but we are mandated reporters. If we see something happening with our clients that is not right, is not ethically right, or legally within the confines of the law, we need to report that, or we may have the chances of losing our license. Here's an example of fidelity in a fieldwork in a school district setting. Okay. Hi, Cody, and I'm from CUCA. I'm your occupational therapist today. What is wrong with this? Why is this not a correct statement that Cody could make, and why? Okay. The next one is justice. So this is having fairness, equity, and equality. This is following all state, federal, and local laws, as well as facility policies. So these are policies that are set forth by the facility. And we have to report and document any professional activities. If you don't document what you've done with a client, it didn't happen. Meaning that if it's not documented, there is no way to prove that something occurred. So documentation is very important in terms of justifying what has been done with our clients, as also how you're going to get reimbursed for something that is done with your clients. Well, on your second level 2 fieldwork, this is an example. You arrive and realize the paperwork is done entirely differently than your last pediatric site. You assume that they're just not up to date as your last site, and you conduct paperwork in the previous style. Is this correct or not, and why? I'm going to have you take a minute and explain to me why or why not this is correct. Okay. The AOTA Code of Ethics is a link that's on the Moodle site, but I'm also putting this in the presentation. When you click here, you're going to open up the AOTA site. You're going to go to the Practice tab and click that, then click Ethics. Then in the Ethics section, there's a hyperlink for the OT Code of Ethics. When you open it up, it's going to be a journal page. You're going to click the PDF, and then you're going to read through the Code of Ethics. The information that is in the Code of Ethics is very similar to what is in the O'Brien book, but there's more details specifically related to OT. And with the O'Brien book, this is also a document that is used by AOTA. So that's why there's a lot of similarities. Okay. And then for the discussion of this model, I want you to look at box 8.1. It's on page 7 of 3, and it talks about Dave. Dave is a 13-year-old boy, and he's reached his OT goals. I want you to read through this, this little case snippet, and then I want you to look at all the steps that were done in the steps of the ethical decision-making process, those 6 that we talked about earlier in this presentation. And then you're going to look at and read through the consideration and the analysis of those steps. And then in your own words, I want you to summarize an ethical decision-making process that you identified that is relevant to Dave's story. I don't want you to use any kind of verbatim summations that are already in the book, but rather something in your own words. And then I will reply to that. Good luck, and I'll be talking to you soon.